There have been many disappointments in the MMO space from MMOs that actually did launch and did not live up to expectations or eventually did shut down. And that could be a future video depending on how this one does. But this list of MMO disappointments are those projects that never saw the light of day but held a lot of promise in terms of ideas, funding, or the people behind the project. I tried to make this a top 5 list, but I found the top 3 to be so far ahead of the rest of the contenders that it felt weird putting them in the same list. I will link a couple of articles in the description of other failed projects if you want to see more. The number 3 biggest MMO that never launched is Project Copernicus from Kurt Schilling's 38 Studios, which started development in 2006 and shut down in 2012. The reason I put this at number 3 is the game had a huge amount of funding, totaling $133 million, which is a lot more than a lot of AAA MMOs have been made for. Some of that funding did go to a project that was made to try to keep the studio running, Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, an action combat RPG that was well received. And the studio had a stacked team in addition to the funding, so it would seem that by all accounts, this game could have been incredible if it ever launched. However, the studio somehow ran out of money through severe mismanagement and went bankrupt in 2012. Not a whole lot is known about what the game was actually like, but it was said to be similar to WoW, and again with the amount of funding they had and with the very stacked staff that they had, I think it had a lot of promise. But I do want to say I've seen this thing thrown around many times, stacked staff, ex-Blizzard devs, ex-Riot devs, and more times than not, these projects that make these claims of having stacked teams end up failing, and that was certainly the case with this one. The number 2 biggest MMO that never launched is Project Titan from Blizzard, which started development in 2007 and shut down in 2014. This project, by all accounts, was going to be the WoW killer from the company that made WoW. The hype was real for this project, but not much was known about the project before it shut down in 2014, with Mike Morhaime saying the reason it shut down was simply it was not fun. Of course, there was probably a lot more to it, as there always is, but we will never know. What we do know is the assets from the game were reused in Overwatch. So between Overwatch gameplay and the information that did eventually leak out about Project Titan, we get a glimpse of what the game was planned to be. The combat was compared to Team Fortress 2, which makes sense as that is what Overwatch combat is most similar to. The setting was said to be a near-future version of Earth after humans successfully defeated an alien invasion. And if you've played Overwatch, you know the maps are named based on Earth locations. For example, the Havana map, so you can see that the assets were definitely reused. Players would join one of 3 factions that were waging a cold war over control of the planet. The game was split into 2 parts, the real world and the shadow world. In the real world part of the game, which took place during the day, players would do normal tasks such as crafting, work, and socializing. Players could run a business or have a normal job. Then at night, players would partake in shadow world activities which involved the combat and the Cold War elements of the game. The goal of the developers was to make both gameplay loops enjoyable so players could specialize in either one. But that was not the case. The project was eventually dropped, and many people were left looking for that true next generation MMO experience for a lot longer. And if I'm being honest, the way the game is being described, I can see why it was dropped, because to me it doesn't sound fun on paper. But obviously without playing it or ever seeing it, we'll never know. And that leads me to the number 1 biggest MMO that never launched, EverQuest Next, which started development in 2009 and shut down in 2016. The reason I put this at number 1 over Project Titan is because we knew a lot more about the game, because the development was very open, and in general, I think the ideas behind the project just sounded a lot better than what Project Titan sounded to me. EverQuest Next had a tremendously ambitious plan that had many people very interested, including myself, as I was one of the many who would pay to get access to the landmark version of the game. This was to be a sandbox MMO with a fully destructible voxel-based world. It was planned to have a multi-class system where players pick a starting class, but through normal gameplay they could collect more classes that they could switch to. It was going to have action combat, 2 weapons available for each class, with 4 skills being from the weapon and 4 from the class. It was going to have emergent AI, where NPCs might be affected by player behavior and attack player settlements, or an orc camp might decide to move to a new location based on changes in the the world. So well before AI became this big buzzword, as it has for the last few years, these guys had some plans to do some very interesting things with AI. And the reality is AI algorithms have been around for quite some time. It's only in the last few years it's gotten a lot more hype because it's more accessible to more people now. EverQuest Next was going to have server-wide public quests that might take months to complete, and these events could permanently change the world. So a city that NPCs are building, players could choose to either aid or hinder that city being built. The result would see that city either exist or not exist based on player interaction. And there was a lot more to this game as well. I will link articles to the full breakdowns of both Titan and EQ Next in the description if you want to know more about both. And that is my top 3 biggest MMOs that never made it to launch. Let me know if there are others that you guys think should have made this list. Thanks for watching all the way to the end, and with that I'll see you guys in the next video.